My daughter spent 16 years telling anyone who'd listen that I was as good as dead to her. Then I sold my roofing company for $14 million, bought a place out on the water in Camden, Maine, and the very next morning she was standing on my porch with her husband, a stack of matching luggage, and a teenage girl I had never once laid eyes on. She didn't say hello. She didn't say she was sorry. She looked past me at the foyer behind my shoulder, at the wide pine staircase and the windows that gave out onto the harbor, and the first words out of her mouth in 16 years were, "Well, Dad, this'll do. We were thinking we'd take the rooms upstairs. I'm 71 years old. My name is Roy Hutchins, though most folks who ever worked for me just called me boss, and a few who go back far enough call me Hutch. I started out at 19 carrying bundles of shingles up a ladder in the August heat outside Bangor, and I retired the chairman of the biggest commercial roofing outfit in northern New England. I tell you that not to brag. I tell you that so you understand what kind of man was standing in that doorway when my own flesh and blood tried to walk over the top of me like I was a welcome mat. If you've ever been ridden off by the people who were supposed to love you, you'll know the feeling that went through me right then. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder. Let me back up. My wife, Eleanor, passed in the spring of 2010. Cancer. The slow kind that gives you just enough hope to keep breaking your heart. My daughter, Meredith, was 31 at the time, and she had married a man named Garrett 3 years before that. I never liked Garrett. I'll be honest about it. He had a handshake like a wet dish rag and a way of looking at the price tag on everything in your house while he smiled at your face. But Eleanor told me to keep my mouth shut, that Meredith was a grown woman, and so I kept it shut. The trouble started at the funeral, which is about the lowest a man can be brought. My wife wasn't even cold, and Garrett was asking me in the church parking lot what the plan was for the estate. Those were his words. The estate, like Eleanor, was a tax document. I told him there was no estate, just a house with a mortgage and a business that owed more than it was worth that year, which was true at the time. We were in the middle of the recession, and I was leveraged to my eyeballs, keeping my crews employed. He didn't like that answer. Neither did Meredith, who I think had spent the whole drive up convincing herself that her grief came with a payout. Things went bad fast after that. Garrett got it into Meredith's head that I'd hidden money from her, that her mother's real inheritance had been spirited away. Every phone call became an interrogation. Every holiday became an ambush. And then one Thanksgiving, the last one, Garrett stood up at my own table and called me a liar and a cheap old fraud in front of everyone, and my daughter, my Meredith, looked me dead in the eye and said, "He's right. You've always cared more about those trucks than about us." I asked her to leave my house. I figured we'd cool off and patch it. Families fight. But the patch never came. The calls stopped. The cards stopped. I'd mail a birthday check, and it had come back uncashed, the envelope marked "Return to Sender" in Garrett's handwriting. After 3 or 4 years, I stopped trying. I told myself a man can only knock on a locked door so many times before he starts to feel like a fool. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn for 16 long years, was that somewhere in there, Meredith had a baby, a daughter, and she never told me. She let me become a stranger to my own grandchild on purpose, because Garrett decided a grandfather was just another mouth that might want to say, another set of eyes on the money he was sure I was sitting on. So that's the porch. That's who was standing on it. My daughter, older and harder than I remembered, in a coat that cost more than my first truck. My son-in-law, gone soft and gray, with a chin that had multiplied, and behind them both, half hidden by the luggage, like she was trying to disappear into it, a girl of about 16, with my late wife's exact eyes. I knew those eyes the second I saw them. It took the wind clean out of me. "You're not coming in," I said. Meredith laughed. An actual laugh. "Don't be ridiculous, Dad. We drove 11 hours. Where else are we supposed to go? You got, 6 bedrooms here? You're rattling around this place all alone. We're family," I said. "That's a funny word coming from you." Garrett pushed past me, just put a hand on the door and shoved it wider and stepped into my front hall, dragging a wheeled suitcase behind him that left a black scuff across my new floor. "Water under the bridge, Roy," he said. not even looking at me. Wow, look at this. You did all right for yourself, didn't you? After all that crying poor. I stood there and let him walk in. I want you to remember that because it matters later. I let him walk in. The girl stayed on the porch, hugging her own elbows, watching me with those eyes like she was waiting for me to start yelling. Somebody had taught her to expect yelling. "What's your name?" I asked her, gentle as I could manage. She glanced at her mother before she answered, which told me a great deal. "Josie," she said, 16 years old. I'd missed all of it. Her first word, her first day of school, every birthday. I'd been mailing checks to a return address while this child grew up, not even knowing she had a grandfather. I'll tell you the truth. Right then, I wanted to throw the both of them off my property and pull that girl inside and slam the door. But something stopped me, and it's the same thing that's kept me alive in business for 50 years. When a deal feels wrong, you don't walk away mad. You stay quiet, and you find out exactly how wrong it is, and then you decide what to do with that. So I let them in. I gave them coffee, and I started listening. It didn't take long to see they weren't here to make peace. By that first afternoon, Meredith was opening cabinets in my kitchen and clucking her tongue at the dishes, telling me I'd need to upgrade everything if I was going to have people over. Garrett had found my study and was sitting in my chair, feet up on my desk, scrolling his phone. When I came in, he didn't move his feet. He just said, "You're going to want to get this whole place put in a trust, Roy, for tax reasons. Meredith and I can help you set that up. We know a guy." "I'll bet you do," I thought, and little Josie. That girl wouldn't say 10 words at dinner, and when I asked her about school, just normal. "What grade are you in? What subjects do you like?" Garrett cut in before she could answer. "She's taking a break from all that," he said. "School's overrated. We're keeping her options open." "A break," I said. "You wouldn't get it," Meredith said. That night, after they'd gone up, I went out onto the back porch where the cell signal's best, and I called the only man on this earth I trust without thinking twice about it. His name's Booker. 40 years he ran my crews, my second in command, the man who taught half the roofers in this state how to walk a steep pitch without dying. He's 78 now, and meaner than a wet cat, and I love him like a brother. They showed up, I told him. He was quiet a second. Meredith, and the husband, and a granddaughter, Book, a granddaughter I never knew I had. 16 years old. They've been hiding her from me. I heard him let out a long breath. "What do they want? What do you think they want? What do you think they want? They want the house. They want the money. They want me to sign things." I looked back through the glass at the warm-lit windows of my own home, full of people who'd come to take it from me. But there's something off about the girl, Book. Something's wrong with how scared she is. I aim to find out what before I do anything. "You want me to come up?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm gonna need you, and I'm gonna need Pat." Pat is Patricia Okafor. She was my company's attorney for 30 years, and she's the sharpest, most ruthless legal mind in the state of Maine. And she retired the same year I did to a house 10 minutes from mine. When I called her the next morning, she answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. "Roy Hutchins," she said. "I figured I'd hear from you eventually. You don't sell a company for 14 million and not have the vultures circle." "Funny you should put it that way," I said. I told her everything. The funeral, the 16 years, the porch, the suitcases, the talk of trust and a guy, the girl who'd been pulled out of school, the husband who looked at my house the way a butcher looks at a hog, and Pat, who never wastes a word, said, "Froy, has anybody asked you to sign anything yet, or just talked about it?" "Just talked. So far." "Good. Don't. Not a napkin, not a Christmas card, nothing. Bring me a list of every account you have and every asset. And let me run that son-in-law of yours. People like that, they don't show up clean. There's a reason they came knocking now and not 5 years ago." So began the part where I played the fool. Here's what I'd figured out by the second day, lying awake at 3 in the morning. They didn't believe I was rich by accident. In their minds, I was a dumb old laborer who'd gotten lucky, and luck can be taken from a dumb old man. They thought I was lonely. They thought I was soft in the head, or getting there, and I decided I would give them exactly the man they expected to see, because a man they underestimate is a man who never sees the punch coming. So I got vague. I started forgetting things on purpose. Where I'd put my keys, what day it was, I'd stop mid-sentence and look confused. I let Garrett explain the news to me like I was a child, and then, on the third morning, I staged the phone call. I'd set it up with Booker the night before. At 9 sharp, while they were all at my breakfast table eating my food, my phone rang. I answered it on the porch, just outside the open kitchen door, close enough that every word would carry. "What do you mean the bank's calling the note?" I said, loud, my voice cracking. I let real fear into it. Not hard to fake when you've actually lived through a recession that nearly took everything. "Booker, I put $1 million down on this place. I thought the rest was financed clean." "What do you mean the line of credit's frozen? What investments?" Booker, slow down." Through the doorway, I watched the forks go still. I watched Garrett's head come up like a bird dog. "They can't take the house," I said, gripping the porch rail, letting my hand shake. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Booker, I've got family staying with me right now. I can't." I let my voice break clean off. I leaned against the post like my knees had quit. Then, just loud enough, almost a whisper, "Next month. They're saying they'll start seizing assets next month." I hung up. I stood out there a good while with my back to them, getting my face right. When I came back in, hollow-eyed and stooped, my daughter was looking at me with an expression I'll remember to my grave. It wasn't worry. It wasn't love. It was calculation. She was doing math. And the math had just changed, and she was deciding whether I was still worth the trouble. "Dad," she said, real careful, "is everything okay with your finances?" "I don't want you to worry about it," I said. "I'll figure it out." I always do. And here's the thing about people who came to rob you. When they think the safe is full, they're patient and polite. When they think it's emptying out, they panic. And panic people get sloppy. They show you who they really are. That night I heard them talking through the heating vent. Old houses carry sound like that, a thing they didn't know and I did. I sat on the floor of the upstairs hall in my socks, 71 years old, eavesdropping on my own child, and I listened to my daughter and her husband plan to gut me. "If it's all leveraged, there's no point," Garrett was saying. "I told you this might be a bust." "It's not a bust." Meredith's voice low and hard. "The house alone, even underwater, there's equity. And he's got that pension, the Social Security. We get power of attorney, we get conservatorship, we control all of it. You heard him on the phone. He's losing it, Garrett. He's confused. A doctor sees him like this, signs the paper, and we're his legal guardians. We don't even need him to agree. That takes months. Then we start now. And the girl, my granddaughter, my Josie. Whitlock said if we deliver by the end of the month, he'll knock the whole thing off. The whole 40 grand. Clean slate. Whitlock." I held very still. "I don't like using her like that," Garrett said, and for 1 second I almost felt something for him, but then he kept going. "What if she talks? What if she tells the old man?" "She won't. She's terrified of you. Keep it that way." I sat in that dark hallway and I felt something I had never felt in 71 years of life. I'd been cheated before. I'd been sued, double-crossed, lied to by men I'd shared a tent with. But I had never wanted to put my hands on another human being until I heard my daughter talk about using my grandchild to pay off a debt to a man named Whitlock. I did not go barging in there. I want to be clear about that because I've thought about it 1,000 times since, and people have asked me why I didn't just call the police that very night, why I didn't grab the girl and dial 911. I'll tell you why. Because if I called the sheriff at midnight on what I'd overheard through a heating vent, what did I have? A confused story from an old man the suspects were already telling people was senile. They'd deny it. They'd say I was paranoid, that I was the unstable one they were already building that exact case. They'd take Josie and drive off in the morning and I'd never find her again. And whatever Whitlock had planned would happen somewhere I couldn't reach. I needed evidence. I needed it airtight. And most of all, I needed that girl to stay under my roof, where I could see her, until I could make her safe for good and not just for a night. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I went back to bed, and I let them sleep under my roof, and I started building my case in the dark. The next day I went to see Pat, telling them I had a doctor's appointment, which, given they thought I was falling apart, they were thrilled to hear. Pat had a folder waiting on her desk. She slid it across to me without a word. I opened it. Garrett, it turned out, was not the small-time grifter I'd taken him for. He was a disaster. 2 bankruptcies, a foreclosed house in Connecticut, and the most recent chapter, the one that explained everything. He lost a fortune they never had on a string of online sports books, and one of those crypto things. And he owed a man named Dale Whitlock just under $40,000. Whitlock fronted as a private lending consultant out of Portland. In truth, he was a loan shark with a couple of arrests for assault and a known habit of taking payment in ways that don't show up on a balance sheet. $40,000, Pat said. That's the number. And Roy, the way these arrangements sometimes go when a man can't pay, Whitlock has been known to take a placement. A young person. Off the books. For work. I've seen it in 2 other files. You understand what I'm telling you. I understood. They were going to hand Josie to that man to settle a gambling debt, and to my daughter it was just balancing an account. What do you want to do? Pat asked me. I looked out her window at the grey harbor for a long time. Then I said, I want you to buy the debt. Pat raised one eyebrow. Come again? $40,000 is nothing. Find Whitlock's people. Offer him full value cash today. I want to own that loan by tomorrow morning. I want the paperwork in my hand. Roy, you be paying off your son-in-law's gambling debts with your own money. No, I said. I'm not paying it off. I'm buying it. Right now Whitlock owns Garrett. He's got the leverage. He can use that girl. But the second I own that note, I own Garrett. Every legal remedy that man has, every threat it transfers to me. And a debtor will do just about anything to keep his creditor happy. I don't want Whitlock's muscle. I want Whitlock's paper. I leaned forward. They think they're playing me. I'm going to buy the whole board out from under them. Pat looked at me for a good 10 seconds. Then a slow smile spread across her face. The kind I hadn't seen since the old days. I always did love working for you, she said, and reached for the phone. While she made the call, I made one of my own. I told Booker to round up the old crew. And then I did the thing that set the whole rest of it in motion. I went home and I told my daughter and son-in-law that I'd had a thought. I've been a stranger to my own granddaughter, I said at dinner, doing my best to sound like a sad, beaten old man making peace with his end. Whatever happens with the bank, I want to do one thing right. I want to throw a little party, Saturday, welcome you all home, invite a few old friends. Maybe it's the last hurrah for this house. I let my voice tremble. Let me have that, before they take it. Garrett practically lit up. A party meant an audience. An audience meant witnesses. The kind you want around when you're building a story about an old man losing his marbles. That's a beautiful idea, Roy, he said. Meredith squeezed my hand across the table for the first time in 16 years, and her hand was cold. There's just one thing I need from you, Dad, she said, sweet as syrup. Saturday. There's some paperwork, just to protect you, so the bank can't take everything. We'll have it ready. You just sign where Garrett shows you. Of course, I said. Whatever you think is best, sweetheart. She had no idea I'd already read every line of what she planned to put in front of me. Pat had pulled the draft conservatorship petition off the lawyer Garrett had been emailing turns. Out he used the house Wi-Fi, the fool, and Pat's investigator did the rest legally and cleanly. I knew exactly what they were going to ask me to sign. I just let them keep believing the old man would sign it. Saturday came clear and cold, the harbor flat as glass. Meredith had taken over. She'd hired a caterer on my dime, brought in flowers, strung lights. The guests were her kind of people, a few couples from whatever country club orbit Garrett still clung to by his fingernails, polished and bored, holding little glasses of wine. And all evening I watched my daughter work the room, leaning in close to this person and that, her face arranged into tragedy, telling them all the same story. My poor father. His mind's going. We had to step in. It's so hard, watching him slip. I caught fragments of it as I shuffled through my own house playing the part, and every fragment was another nail she was driving into me in front of an audience, so that when she stood me up to sign those papers, every witness in the room would already believe I didn't know what I was doing. She was good. I'll give her that. 16 years she practiced heating me, and she'd gotten good at it. Around 8 o'clock she clinked a glass and got everyone's attention and called me up to the front of the room near the big windows. Garrett stood beside her with a leather folder. Josie was off in the corner, white as paper, watching me like she was watching a car about to go off a bridge. Everyone, Meredith said, Thank you for being here for my father tonight. As some of you know, it's been a hard season. Dad's not been himself. A few sympathetic murmurs, but we're family, and family takes care of each other. So tonight, with all of you as our witnesses, Dad's going to sign a few documents that'll let us help take care of him and his affairs going forward. She turned to me, holding out a pen, her smile sharp as a knife. Go ahead, Dad, right where Garrett shows you. I took the pen. I looked at it. And then from the front of the house, the whole room felt the rumble before they heard it. It came up through the floor and rattled the wine glasses, a deep diesel thunder, and then the windows lit up white from a set of headlights swinging into the drive, and an air horn blasted long and loud, the kind that lives on the front of a heavy work truck. The guests turned to the windows. Meredith's smile faltered. The front door swung open and Booker walked in. Behind him came 8 of my old crew. Men in their 60s and 70s, most of them, in flannel and canvas and steel-toed boots, with the smell of the road and 40 years of honest work hanging off them. They tracked a little dirt across Meredith's rented marble. They looked around at the silk and the wine and the soft pink lighting like a herd of bulls who'd wandered into a perfume counter. And they were the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. Meredith recovered first and went at Booker like a dog protecting a bone. "Excuse me," she said, voice shrill. "This is a private event. You can't just deliveries are around the back. Who let you in?" Booker took off his cap, slow, and held it in his 2 big scarred hands. "We're not a delivery, ma'am," he said, quiet and level. "We're guests. Roy invited us. These are not guests." She turned to the room, hand pressed to her chest, doing tragedy again. "I'm so sorry, everyone. My father isn't well. He has these old associates from his working days. He gets confused about who." She wheeled back on Booker. "You need to leave. Right now. Look at you. You're filthy. This is a black tie evening and you smell like a garage. Go around back. There might be food for you in the kitchen, but get out of my sight." The room had gone dead silent, and every guest in it was looking at my daughter, and what they were seeing was not a grieving woman caring for her father. They were seeing somebody scream at a roomful of old working men like they would trash on her shoe. Garrett, over by the bar, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him, but he didn't say one word. He just swirled his drink and stared at the carpet, the same as he did at every funeral and every Thanksgiving of his life. I set the pen down on the folder, and I stood up straight. I dropped the stoop I'd been carrying for 3 days. I let my shoulders come back where they belong, and when I spoke, my voice wasn't the wavering thing they've been hearing all week. It was the voice that's run job sites in 40-mile-an-hour wind. "They're my guests, Meredith," I said. "Come on in, Book. There's plenty." She spun around. "Dad, the papers, remember the bank." "There's no bank," I said. The room went still in a different way now. "There's no frozen account. There's no note being called. There's no foreclosure." I looked right at her, and then at Garrett. "I sold the company for $14 million. The house is paid for in cash, free and clear. I never owed a dime on it. The phone call you heard, the one that had you measuring my coffin 3 days early, that was Booker, reading me a script I wrote myself so I could watch the 2 of you decide whether I was still worth robbing once you thought the money was gone." Garrett's drink slipped in his hand. "You want to talk about papers," I said, and I reached into my own jacket and pulled out the folder Pat had prepared, and I held it up. "Let's talk about papers. This is a draft conservatorship petition, the one you were going to put under my pen tonight, the one that says I'm not competent to manage my own affairs, signed in front of all these good people so nobody would question it later. I've read every word. My attorney has too. It's fraud, and there's a name for trying to do it in front of witnesses. It's called a conspiracy." The guests had gone from confused to riveted. A couple of them had quietly set down their wine. "And this," I said, and pulled out the second folder, the one I'd been waiting all night to use. "This is the part you're really going to want to hear. As of yesterday afternoon, I am the legal owner of a $40,000 promissory note signed by my son-in-law and previously held by a Mr. Dale Whitlock of Portland." I watched the blood leave Garrett's face. "That's right. I bought your debt, Garrett. Whitlock doesn't own you anymore. I do. Every cent. And I'd got a stack of records, your bankruptcies, the foreclosure, the warrant they pulled in Connecticut for the checks you wrote on a closed account sitting in my lawyer's office with copies in 3 places. It was so quiet I could hear the harbors through the glass. But here's the one that matters, I said, and now my voice did shake, but not from weakness. I know about Whitlock's offer. I know what delivering by the end of the month meant. I know the two of you sat in my guest room and planned to hand my 16-year-old granddaughter to a loan shark to settle a gambling debt. Somebody in the room gasped out loud. A woman near the windows put her hand over her mouth. Meredith's face had gone the color of paste. Dad, that's not you don't understand. I understand fine, I said. I understand it better than I've ever understood anything. I turned to Booker. Book, would you ask the sheriff's deputies to come in now? I believe they're parked at the end of the drive. They were. Pat had arranged that too. We'd handed the county everything that morning. The recorded admissions Pat had lawfully obtained. The financial records. The conservatorship fraud. And most of all, the plan for Josie. Which is the kind of thing that makes a deputy's jaw go tight. 2 of them came through my front door in uniform, and the polished people from the country club pressed themselves back against the walls, and my daughter started to cry. And for the first time I understood that her tears, even now, were only for herself. They arrested Garrett that night for the fraud scheme and the outstanding warrant, and the investigation that opened up over what they'd planned for Josie pulled my daughter into it right alongside him. I want to be honest with you here, because people always ask me whether I regret it, whether a father should send his own child to face charges. I thought hard about that, and I decided that the day she planned to sell my grandchild was the day she stopped being something I had to protect. Letting her walk would not have been mercy. It would have just been one more locked door I knocked on like a fool. Both of them face what they earned, and I sleep fine. When the cars pulled out of my drive and the guests had stammered their goodbyes and fled, the house went quiet, and it was just me and Booker and the crew and Josie. She was still in the corner, shaking. I went over to her slow, the way you approach a dog that's been kicked, and I crouched down to her level even though my knees screamed at me. You're safe now, I told her. It's done. Nobody's handing you to anybody. Nobody's pulling you out of school. Nobody's hurting you ever again. Not while I'm breathing. She looked at me with my Eleanor's eyes, brimming over, and she said the thing that broke me clean in half. She said, I didn't know I had a grandpa. Well, I said, and my own voice gave out, you've got one now. You've got one for good. The crew stayed half the night. They told that girl every embarrassing story they had on me, the time I put a roof on backwards as an apprentice, the time I fell straight through a rotten porch in front of the whole crew, the time I cried like a baby at her grandmother's wedding. She laughed. First time I ever heard her laugh. And it sounded so much like Eleanor that I had to go stand on the porch a minute and get hold of myself. Josie lives with me now. I went down to that school the following Monday and got her enrolled and sat with her at the kitchen table going over her classes, and I told her she was going to finish high school right here, no breaks, no options open, and then she was going to college if she wanted it, and I'd see to all of it. She told me she thought she might want to study architecture. Wants to design buildings instead of just putting roofs on them, she says. Like that's a betrayal, and I tell her it's the smartest thing anybody in this family said in 20 years. Summers, she works with me. Because I'm 71 and not dead, and I started a small thing, just a little restoration outfit, fixing up the old captain's houses around the harbor that nobody else knows how to fix anymore. I sold my name to the new owners, but I kept everything that mattered, which is 40 years of knowing how a thing is built and how to build it right. And I'm teaching her how to read a contract so nobody ever puts one under your pen that you haven't read yourself. How to look a man in the eye. How to do honest work and be proud of your dirty hands. The things her mother never learned, and that's exactly why her mother ended up where she is. I think about Garrett and Meredith sometimes out there facing what's coming to them. I don't wish them dead, I just don't wish them here. There's a difference, and it took me 71 years and one terrible week to learn it. People say you can't pick your family. I used to believe that. I don't anymore. Blood put my daughter in this world, but blood didn't put those 8 men in their work boots on my doorstep when I needed them, and blood isn't what's sitting across my breakfast table every morning sketching buildings on a napkin and stealing my coffee. That's something you build, the same as a house. Plumb and square and one honest board at a time, and anybody who tells you the name on the family tree is what counts has never had the people who share that name show up at the door with their hands out and their hearts already gone. So I'll ask you the same thing I asked Booker that night on the porch, before any of it started, when I still thought maybe I owed them something just because we shared a last name. Tell me, was I too hard on my own daughter after everything, or did she get exactly what she chose, every step of the way with her eyes wide open? I've made my peace with my answer. I'd like to hear yours. I've turned that week over in my mind 1,000 times since, and the part that still keeps me up isn't what Meredith and Garrett tried to do. It's how predictable it all was looking back. People don't fall into a moment like that porch out of nowhere. They build their way there, one small choice at a time, the same way a roof goes, bad one missed nail at a time until the whole thing caves in a storm. Garrett chose the easy money over honest work for 20 years, and easy money always comes due. Meredith chose to believe a comfortable lie about her father over a hard truth about her husband, and that lie hollowed her out until she could stand in my kitchen and plan to sell her own daughter and call it balancing the books. None of it was bad luck. It was the harvest of every seed they planted. What saved me wasn't money. I want to be clear about that, because folks see the 14 million and think that's the weapon. It wasn't. The money was just the bait they couldn't resist. What actually saved me, and saved Josie, was 3 things I'd spent a whole life learning the hard way, mostly by getting them wrong first. The first is that you don't get to bend the truth to suit yourself. I could have signed those papers to keep the peace. I could have told myself a granddaughter wasn't my problem. But a man who trades his conscience for an easy night is just doing a slower version of what Garrett did. Doing the right thing cost me my own daughter, and I'd do it again before breakfast. The second is that staying calm and thinking is almost always stronger than swinging first. Every instinct I had that night in the hallway screamed at me to kick the door in. If I had, I'd have lost. They wanted me loud, sloppy, easy to call crazy. So I went quiet and I gathered, and quiet won. And a third is plain old stubbornness. 16 years of locked doors will teach a man to quit. I almost did, but the same mule-headed grit that put me up a ladder at 19 is what kept me building the case in the dark when every cell in my body wanted to give up and just be sad. So if you take anything from an old roofer, take this. Guard your honesty like it's the foundation, because everything you build sits on it. Sharpen your head, because the world is full of people counting on you not to think. And when life slams the door, get up anyway, because the people worth saving are usually on the other side of it. Josie sketches buildings at my table every morning now. That's what those 3 things built. Not the house. Her.